You find it behind the bathroom cabinet. A dark patch, spreading along the grout, climbing up toward the ceiling. You call someone to look at it. That visit alone costs you $2, $3, sometimes $600, just for a man to stand there and tell you what you already knew. Yes, that is mold. Then the real bill comes. Plastic sheeting goes up over your doorways. Machines run day and night pulling the air through filters. Men in white suits carry bags of your drywall out to a truck. When they leave, the invoice is usually around $2,000. If it is a basement or a crawl space, it can run $10,000, $20,000, even $30,000. And here's the part nobody says out loud while they are writing that check. 6 months later, the mold comes back. It almost always comes back, because what they did was remove what was already there. Nobody treated the wood underneath so that it could not grow there again. That was never the job. That was never the business. I want to tell you about something my grandmother Rosina kept in a tin on the shelf of our root cellar, mixed into a bucket of hot water twice a year, and brushed onto the beams with an old paintbrush that never left that cellar. It cost her almost nothing. And it is the same chemistry, the very same mineral, that a company today sells to professional exterminators for $80 or $100 a jug, to protect the wood framing of new houses from rot and decay. My name is Martin Hofer. I grew up on a small farm in the foothills south of Munich in Bavaria, and my grandmother kept our whole household fed and dry and free of rot for as long as I can remember, without ever once calling a company to come fix what she could fix herself with a bucket and a brush. Today, I want to walk you through what she used, why it works on the chemistry level, where it actually helps and where it does not, because I will not stand here and tell you it is magic. It is not magic. It is a mineral, and minerals have honest limits, and I respect you too much to hide that from you. Stay with me, because by the end of this you will know exactly what to mix, where to put it, and why the people who make their living pulling mold out of your walls will never be the ones to tell you about it. Let me start with the thing everybody already has under their kitchen sink. Bleach. You spray bleach on a mold stain, and for a week, maybe 2 weeks, it looks gone. Then it comes back, and this time, it is darker than before. There is a plain reason for that, and once you understand it, you will never reach for the bleach bottle again. What you see on the wall, that black or green smudge, is only the fruiting body. The organism itself lives underneath what you can see. It sends thin threads down into the drywall, into the wood, into the grout lines, and those threads are called hyphae. Bleach is chlorine dissolved in water. The chlorine, the part that actually kills anything, gets used up almost instantly by the surface it touches. It never reaches down into those threads. But the water in the bleach does reach down there. So when you spray bleach on a moldy wall, you are cleaning the top layer while pouring water straight down to the roots. You are not killing the mold. You are feeding it a drink. Even the government's own environmental agency has quietly said in their official guidance that bleach is not recommended as a routine practice for mold cleanup. That sentence has never once made it onto the label of the spray bottle sitting on the store shelf. My grandmother never used bleach in that cellar. She used a white mineral powder called borax, the same thing you can still buy in the laundry aisle for $2 or $3 a box. Now, I want to be honest with you the way I always try to be, because a channel that tells you the truth is worth more than one that only tells you what sounds nice. Borax was not something my great-great-grandmother carried over a mountain pass in a wagon. It has been used to protect wood from rot since about the 1870s, which in the life of a Bavarian farmhouse is not so very long ago. So I will not pretend this is some ancient secret whispered down through 10 generations. It is not. But it follows the oldest rule my grandmother ever lived by, which is that you treat the wood before it rots. You do not wait and pay to rip it out afterward. That rule is as old as any farmhouse in my valley. Here is why the mineral works, in plain words. When you dissolve borax in water, you get a solution that sits at a pH of about 9.3. That is well on the alkaline side, and most mold species prefer to grow in conditions that are closer to neutral or acidic, somewhere between pH 4 and 6. So already, before anything else happens, you have made the wood a place mold does not want to be. But the pH is only half the story. The boron in that mineral gets inside the fungus and interferes directly with how it feeds itself. It disrupts the enzymes the fungus needs to function, and it stops spores from germinating in the first place. This is not a farmer's guess. The United States Department of Agriculture Forest Products Laboratory in Madison, Wisconsin, has published decades of research on exactly this. Researchers named Clausen and Yang back in 2007, and a later team led by Coleman in 2013, both found that borate compounds are devastating against the fungi that actually rot structural wood, the brown, rot, and white rot organisms that eat a joist or a beam from the inside out. Against those, borax is one of the most effective things you can put on wood. Now, here is my honest word, the one the salesman never gives you. Against the common household molds people worry about most, the black and green kinds you find behind a bathroom vanity, borax on its own showed weaker results in that same research. The scientists found that combining the borate with certain fatty acid compounds made it far more effective against those particular species. So I will not tell you that a spray bottle of borax water is a wand you wave at black mold and it disappears forever, because that would not be honest. And honesty is worth more to me than a dramatic sentence. What it is, and what nobody in the remediation business will ever put in an advertisement, is one of the cheapest and most reliable ways to protect the wood in your home, so that mold has a much harder time ever taking hold there in the first place. You treat the joists, the sheathing, the framing, before the problem starts, or after you have already scrubbed the surface clean. For mold sitting on hard surfaces, tile, concrete, grout, borax outperforms bleach by a wide margin because it does not feed the roots the way bleach does. For a deep infestation soaked into drywall, I will tell you plainly, you still need to cut that section out and replace it. But what you replace it with, the new stud, the new sheathing, you can treat with this mineral before you ever close the wall back up. Let me show you exactly how my grandmother mixed it, because the method has not changed since she stood at that same cellar shelf. You take 1 cup of borax and dissolve it into 1 gallon of hot water. Stir it until every grain disappears into the water. That is your solution. For a small patch, a spray bottle does the job. For a whole crawl space, the joists in a basement, the sheathing of an attic, you want a pump sprayer, the kind you carry on your shoulder so you can cover the wood evenly. If there is already visible growth on the surface, scrub it first with a stiff brush and some plain soap and water to lift off the loose material. Then apply your borax solution generously over the wood. And here is the part most folks get wrong because it goes against everything they have been taught about cleaning. Do not rinse it off. You want that mineral to dry right there on the surface and stay. That thin, white residue left behind after it dries is what keeps standing guard against the next spore that tries to land there. For bare wood framing, the joists under your floor, the sheathing in your attic, the studs in a basement wall, this creates a protective layer that is genuinely comparable to what a professional applicator charges hundreds of dollars to spray on. Now, 2 honest limits, because I promised you the truth and not a sales pitch. First, this is a surface treatment. A brush or a sprayer does not drive the mineral deep into the fiber of the wood the way industrial pressure treatment does. For permanent, deep protection, a professional uses a different carrier that penetrates further. What we are doing here is the everyday version, the kind that protects the surfaces you can reach with your own hands, and for most homes, that is exactly what is needed. Second, borax dissolves in water, which means it can also wash back out of wood over time if that wood sits in constant moisture. If you have an active leak, a foundation crack letting water in, fix that leak first. The mineral protects wood that is already dry. It is not a patch for running water. On safety, I will be plain with you the way I always am. Borax has a low toxicity, roughly comparable to ordinary table salt in terms of how much it would take to actually harm you, But that comparison only tells part of the story, and I would be doing you a disservice to leave it there. European regulators classify borax as something that can affect reproduction at high, sustained exposure over time. For the kind of occasional application we are talking about here, spraying it on a joist twice a year, the risk is small, but you still wear gloves, you keep the room aired out while you work, you do not breathe the dry powder, and you keep the box up on a shelf where children and animals cannot reach it. Common sense, the same as with any mineral you keep in the barn or the shed. Now let me tell you why you have never heard any of this from a contractor, because this is the part that made me start filming these videos in the first place. The building codes in this country describe in great detail how to flash a window, how to vent a crawl space, how to lay a vapor barrier. There's not a single line in those codes recommending a borate treatment to protect the wood from fungal growth before it ever starts. Not one line. And the committees that write those codes are not made up only of building inspectors looking out for your family. Trade groups representing manufacturers and contractors hold real seats at that table, sometimes written into formal agreements, and those groups profit far more from a house that eventually needs remediation than from a house that never does. The certification standard that most remediation companies and insurance claims follow, a document called S520, tells professionals to focus on physically removing contaminated material. It does not forbid borax. It simply has no reason to mention a $2 box from the laundry aisle, because nobody in that whole certification pipeline makes a living from a homeowner who fixes the problem once and never calls again. And here is the detail that should really sit with you. There is a commercial product made for professional pest control companies, used every day on framing lumber and new construction, that uses this exact same chemistry, the same mineral family as the box on your shelf. A single-gallon jug of it costs $80 to $100. The box of borax that does the same job for your own basement costs $2 and change. You were never told there was a difference in the chemistry, because there is not one. The only difference is who is selling it to you and what they can charge for the name on the label. My grandmother never called anybody to protect that root cellar. She mixed her bucket twice a year, brushed it onto the beams, and in 70 years that cellar never once grew the kind of black rot that eats through a floor joist. That is not a miracle. That is a mineral doing exactly what the science says it does, applied honestly and applied on time. So here's what I want you to do this weekend. Buy a box of borax, plain, from the laundry aisle. Mix 1 cup into a gallon of hot water. If you have a basement, an attic, a crawl space, take a look at the wood with a flashlight before you start. The way my grandfather used to walk the barn every fall looking for the first sign of trouble. Scrub any visible spot clean first. Then spray the solution onto the bare wood and let it dry without rinsing. Do this once now and again in 6 months, and you will have given that wood a kind of protection. Most of your neighbors are paying thousands of dollars a year to chase after it has already gotten out of hand. Tell me in the comments what you found up there. Old water stains, a musty smell that never quite goes away, a corner of the basement nobody wants to talk about. I read every one of them, and the stories you send back are exactly why I keep making these. Next time, I want to show you what my grandfather built into the walls of that same cellar so the damp never got a foothold there to begin with, using nothing but lime, stone, and where he chose to dig it into the hillside. It is the older cousin to what I showed you today, and the two of them together will keep a cellar dry for 100 years. Until then, mix your bucket, treat your wood, and remember, the people who built these villages with their hands knew things we are only just now starting to remember.